All right, guys. So our final topics here for the day are going to be a couple Star Wars ones. We're going to cut. We were going to go into Bad Batch and give a kind of final review of Bad Batch and everything for the last episode, but John hasn't seen it yet, and frankly, I don't really have too much to say about it. I like the episode. I've liked the whole series so far, but this one was, I would say, the closest to a filler episode that you could really get. They brought back some characters from OG Clone Wars stuff, but it wasn't any. There were some separatists in there. It was nothing crazy. Like it was, and then you see that Omega's good at hollow chess. Like you don't really, you don't really get anything out. You don't get too much out of it. It wasn't bad. Wasn't as good as the last two episodes though. So I really don't have a whole lot to say about it, regardless of the fact. So yeah, we were gonna do that like we normally do at the end here, but instead we're gonna talk about these two other stories that we're gonna lead up into it nevertheless. And the first one is a little bit of a divisive topic. We have one Star Wars topic here that's kind of like negative-ish, and then another topic that's actually pretty cool. It's actually surprisingly cool. It's actually I was surprised at how cool and how well it actually looks like it's gonna turn out. So nevertheless, though, the first one is a little bit controversial, like I've said. I think some people probably blown it a little bit too far out of proportion, but nevertheless, it appears that Disney is no longer going to be using the Slave One name for Boba Fett's infamous spaceship. The Slave One. They're no longer going to be using it, and there's really there's no explanation for it. It hasn't really happened. There's been no formal announcement by Disney, but they are quoted down here by someone else, obviously, who has said because this news originally essentially came out because of a Lego set. Like, of course, we have two Lego leaks that are actually causing trouble out in the world today. And this one though came out because there is a picture of the box for this Slave One ship for Boba Fett for Mandalorian season 2, or is either Mandalorian season 2. John, do you remember if the box art was for Mandalorian season 2? I think it was, right? It wasn't for Book of Boba
I
Fett
think
yet,
I think
right?
the branding was the Mandalorian's line from Lego.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Because I don't see why it would have even been anything to do with Boba Fett yet. Book of Boba Fett, that is. But nevertheless, instead of it saying Slave One and then it being that, it said Boba Fett's Starship or Spaceship, one of the two. So it no
Yeah.
longer says Slave One. And the quote we have here from, I believe, the people at Lego here was, "Yes, I built another. We're not calling it Slave One anymore. This is Boba Fett's Starship." I was right with the first one. And then it says, "Okay, why are we dropping the Slave One name?" And then another gentleman kicks in and says, "Everybody is. It's probably not something which has been announced publicly, but it is just something that Disney doesn't want to use anymore." And now, granted, it doesn't really matter. My biggest thing here with this, like in all honesty, I kind of I would say the same thing that I would say about any movie, in that the name of a movie isn't going to determine whether or not the movie is good. You could call any movie anything you want. It's not gonna change the movie. So calling the Slave One Boba Fett's Starship or Slave 2 or whatever the hell you wanna give it a name, no name, is not gonna change the functionality of the ship. It's not gonna change how much you like the ship, because I don't think anybody likes the ship because it was called Slave One. You like the ship because it's a cool looking ship, it's a unique looking ship, it's Boba Fett's ship. That's why you like it. You know what I mean? So I think it's safe to say it really doesn't matter. So anybody making a big deal out of it, because I don't know why they would be, just relax. The ship is still there. What I don't like about it though is that it just doesn't matter. Like, you know what I mean? It's just something stupid that they're doing for no real reason. Like, because there was one thing, like they go on in that article to say it's like, well, Disney's probably not happy about it because of the connotation it has in the real, like in our reality, in our world, because of the word slave. And it's like, this isn't a galaxy far, far away though. It has nothing to do with anything that has to do with slavery or a slave or anything. And slave is a more universal term than just referring to slavery. It doesn't it's
Yeah.
the existence of the ship being called Slave One. George Lucas didn't name it that as a reference to slavery. Like, I don't know why he named it that, but it has nothing to do with slavery. Like, it's just what it's called, man. Like, so I don't know. What do you think about this? Because I just think it's something that, like, it didn't need to be done because it's like just it's its own thing. And I don't know, I feel like Disney's changed enough stuff with Star Wars that they should just leave some shit alone. All right? You already changed Luke Skywalker. Where does it end, god damn it? Like, where does it end? What do you think about it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's one of these situations where we've gone, in my opinion, we've gone overboard with the kind of sterilization of pop culture and just society and at large. Like you said, the word slave, it has connotations in reference to American history and the institutional slavery that existed in this country for way too long. And that still has ramifications upon our society today. That's that by removing the word slave from a Star Wars starship, you are not solving the problems that exist
Yeah.
because of institutional slavery that existed in the states, centuries ago. Um, I understand that the word may bring up bad connotations in certain in some people's minds, and that's understandable, and you want to be sympathetic to it. But at the same time, if you start removing every single word that has a negative connotation in some circumstances to somebody, you're going to end up with a pretty redacted dictionary pretty soon.
Oh, yeah.
There's lots of words and phrases and terms out there that and the other thing to note is that people that use these terms in negative and derogatory ways or things of that nature, just because you find a way to remove one word from the vernacular of a society doesn't mean they're going to stop. It means they're just going to find a different way of saying it. They're going to adopt some other phrase that they feel means the same thing or does the same thing. All that being said, George Lucas tried to make Greedo shoot first, and the fans just refused to accept it. Disney can try all at once to say that this is not Slave One, that it's Boba's ship, but I have a feeling that Star Wars fans won't really accept it and just continue calling it Slave One. It could be referred to as slave because the ship bows to Boba's will. That could be why you could be talking about it's his property that bows to his will, and that's why he named it that. It has nothing to do with the idea of, like you said, slavery and the owning of another physical person. Slaving one system to another is a computer terminology. It's used in lots of different mechanical situations. So it's one of these situations where it's unfortunate that it's being made such a big deal of, but it's also unfortunate that Disney felt like it was something that they had to, for lack of a better way to put it, try and sneak under the fans' noses and like try and sterilize the series in such a way that maybe wasn't necessary.
Yeah, from what I can understand too, no one really knows why it was called Slave One, like why George essentially came up with the name for it, right? Because it's never even been described by in any sort of canon, at least as far as I'm aware. And I've actually been trying to find anything that while you were talking, I've been trying to find if anyone has a
Sure.
definitive answer as to why. And I've only seen two things that make any sort of sense, but they still haven't been confirmed. And that's Django used to be a slave at one point, and this was like I guess one of the first ships he had stolen from someone post his stint as a slave. So got a slave one, maybe something like that. Who
So
knows?
it was kind of him. It would be kind of like him taking on the terminology that was used to keep him down, to kind of keep himself reminded of where he came from or the hardship. Like, and then in that case, it's more of a term of I don't know what the right word is. It's more a term
Like
of
overcoming
success or
something. Yeah,
overcoming.
exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a term of achievement almost, or a term of pride that he is, I'm not a slave. I'm not a slave so much. I'll use that word in my,
Exactly.
the name my ship that. Yeah.
And then to your point, though, just in the more common terms that it's been used in like the technology aspect of it, someone brought up a point that like, well, Boba Fett can control it remotely, so just
Yeah.
slave one. Like, I mean, that's maybe it's just that because they can control it remotely, so they named it Slave One. Like, in that because they've subsequently there's been a Slave Two, a Slave Three, a Slave Four. So there's been multiple iterations of the ship, and each one just went Slave One, Two, Three, Four. Like, so I mean, that makes sense to me as well. Those are the 2 things that have made the most sense to me is like, okay, well, maybe Django called it that for X reason. Maybe it's just because they could control the damn thing remotely. Like,
It's just
who knows?
it's a very reactionary decision on their part to remove the word from the ship. Like I think we both, from what you said, I think I'm on the same page as you that we both don't really care ultimately. Fans are still going to
Mhm.
call it Slave One. It doesn't really affect. At the end of the day, I'm not going to lose sleep over like whatever Disney, call it whatever you want. To me, it's still going to be Slave One because well, that's what it was or that's what it is. Um, but it's also like it's such an interesting thing because you're saying that slavery is bad and any the term slave is bad because it's association with slavery. Well, Boba Fett's whole profession up until this point was going out and literally capturing people to turn them over to other people to be incarcerated, to basically be made slaves. Now, whether or not that was the person's fault because they had done something wrong, or whether or not it wasn't the person's fault because they had, taken money from someone or owed money to someone, Boba Fett's whole profession was taking somebody else's life and giving it over to somebody else, either by killing them or by turning them over to them for whatever, for to pay back whatever they owed or whatever. And so the whole idea of Boba Fett then becomes problematic. And so then do you like try and remove Boba Fett from the equation? It's just one of those things when you think about the the whole thing, the entire situation as a whole, when you don't just reactionary, have a reactionary approach to a word, but you think about the whole character and the whole idea of the concept of what you're talking about. If you're having a problem with that, then you have to have a problem with everything else.
Oh, yeah. Like, we were talking about off camera. What are they gonna call, Return of the Jedi Leia? Slave Leia, what are they gonna call her?
Yeah,
Leia?
exactly.
She's gonna be
Is
called,
she
like,
now
Bikini Leia?
Bikini
Like
Leia?
like
Yeah, yeah,
what is it?
yeah.
Like, Prisoner Leia? Because it's like that still has a connotation to it in our reality that would technically be frowned upon in some aspects, so, like, can't call her that, like, Oppressed Leia?
There,
Kinda too close to slave. Like, what are you gonna
yeah,
it's just I
yeah.
don't know, it's stupid.
There, there are words and phrases in especially the English, American English, and I'm guessing in other languages too, that definitely have a history of racist and derogatory comments about groups or ethnicities or groups with different sexual orientations and things of that nature. And those terms deserve to be not used to make money and promote products. Like I completely understand the idea of companies and organizations pulling back on some of those terms or terms that are associated with those kinds of thoughts and feelings. But some terms and things are just literally the way we define things. Like murder is bad. Murder is not good. A lot of people have very negative connotations when they hear the word murder because it's affected them personally or it's been something bad that's happened. But we can't really remove the word murder from our vernacular because then what do we call it when somebody kills somebody else? You have to have words that mean stuff. And
Mhm.
so if you start removing words that mean one thing, how then do you reference those things? And so, yeah, it's a weird world we live in right now.
Yeah, especially too, because it's like I said, dude, they call Leia Slave Leia there. Anakin Skywalker literally was a slave. Like, Jango Fett literally was a slave at one point. Like, it's like you can't so it's like, what is next? Like, what is it's just a word. Yeah, it has it like you said, a lot of words have negative connotations, and it's all gonna be subjective regardless. Like, yeah, it's obviously slavery was bad. And like I said, no one was naming it as some I don't know, like it doesn't have a Confederate flag painted on it. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't named that
Yeah.
for any sort of connotation to reference slavery or pay tribute to slavery or anything like that. Like, it really, like I said, it's never even explicitly been explained why, but it doesn't really matter. Like, it's obvious that it wasn't because of any of that because it's never referenced in that way in any aspect, you know? And I think honestly the one that makes the most sense is just that, like, he controls them remotely. I think that makes the most sense. So he just calls it a
Mhm.
slave. It's a slave ship. It does what he wants it to do. He can do it remotely. Like, just like you have slave drives on, like, servers and stuff. It does what you need it to do. It just is
Mhm.
what it is. I don't think there's really any more to it than that. So yeah, it doesn't change anything. I made a joke when I first heard this. It's like, well, Disney, I'm ignoring 3 entire movies that you made, so I'm gonna ignore this too. So it doesn't really
Yeah.
matter. Like, I'm still gonna call
Yeah.
it Slave One, like, because it's what I've known it called forever. It doesn't like I don't know. It doesn't really bother me that they are not gonna call it that anymore. I just think, like you were kind of alluding to, and like we've kind of said, it's like, what's next? Like, what more are you gonna change after this? That's what worries me about it, like more so than anything. Because like at some point, everything's just gonna be different. Like with it, they're just gonna start taking everything away. Like, and obviously that's a bit of a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, like I don't know, fear mongering kind of aspect under how whatever you would want to call it. Like, it's not like it's gonna happen, but like that's what I worry about more than anything. It's just like, okay, well, it starts with this and what's next? Like, that's what I don't like. Because if it's something as literally as meaningless as this, the name of the ship, like goddamn, what's
Well,
next? Like,
what was the ship ever? I honestly never even. I don't remember the ship ever being called Slave One in any of the movies. I
I don't
know it
think
was
it's
called.
actually said it
I
anything.
know it was called that in like product packaging and stuff, but I don't ever remember them. Like the Millennium Falcon is clearly called the Millennium Falcon. Han says, "You never heard of the Millennium Falcon?" Like in the very first movie. I don't remember anybody ever referencing Boba Fett's shipping. His ship was just a ship. Like, I don't remember it ever being referenced anywhere. Um, so then I always try and approach these things like I try and find a way. There's kind of the analytical side of me that breaks it down by like, well, if they're doing this, then what happens with Boba Fett? Like I went through the whole Boba Fett thing and his entire character and the problems that can arise from the whole motivations and what his character does. But then I try and put myself in the shoes of someone that would find this offensive and try and feel like, well, you know, does it hurt somebody that finds this? Is there a segment of the population that would find this hurtful? This term somehow would because ultimately at the end of the day, I don't care one way or the other. It's not never been so ingrained in um love of Star Wars that I like because one of the things is because it was never even said in the movies.
It
It
wasn't.
was just always it would be like if they changed the name of TIE fighter, if the word TIE was bad and they changed it to like dual fighter. Like, okay, I don't know that would affect me a whole
I
lot,
wouldn't
but
be cool with
I
that.
don't know. I don't know. I have
You leave
no
TIE
TIE fighter.
Fighter
I'm gonna
alone.
change TIE fighter
You leave
alone.
them
Okay.
alone, dude. They got like
Okay.
the coolest sound in
What
all of
what
Star
are what
Wars.
are
You leave them
what
alone.
are the names of the dual pod ships in Cloud City?
Oh
what are
God,
those? The orange.
what are they called? I forget what they're called. I can't
Like
think of
if
them
they
right
changed
now.
the names of if
No
they
one would
changed the
care.
name of those,
Yeah,
I wouldn't care. And I'm not sure I really care that much about this other than just kind of the analytical side of me going like, why? Why is that change being made? So now I'm kind of backtracking on what I don't know. At the end of the day, I guess if it saves someone's feelings and someone feels better about it, I do whatever you have to. But I don't think that that's why it was done. I honestly don't believe that there was a section of fandom calling for this change to be made. I believe that this was done in the marketing or the analytical department of Disney. They simply are going through everything in the Star Wars universe and trying to figure out which things could become problematic later and how do we get in front of that. Um,
right.
and that's mainly where, where I then take issue. It's like, if it's not a problem, then are you just making it one for the heck of it?
I can't find like they might just be called cloud cars,
Cloud cars,
or maybe
okay.
that's just the friendly name for them, kind of like Slave One,
Yeah,
because like really it's like some police kind of cruiser from like Uvu 4. I forget it. Yeah, it's a fire spray class vessel. Like is what the kind of ship is. I don't know if they were just called cloud cars or if it's the friendly name. But when I look up,
Cloud car might sound cloud car sounds right, at least maybe like from the old Kenner toy line. That might have
yeah,
been how they were
that's what
playing
they
on
were
the Kenner.
called for those two.
Yeah,
That's what people were because I found some like people selling them, and it's like Storm
yeah.
4
That sounds right,
twin
yeah.
pod cloud city cloud car or whatever.
Yep, okay.
There is
So, like,
one
yeah,
thing I did find
they
out
didn't
though
call
that
them cloud.
might do what?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I found I don't know how much you can believe this because it's inevitably a Reddit thread, but either way, it does actually make a whole lot of sense. Um, so a lot of people might, could take a breath about this whole Slave One name change thing, but it was said out loud by Aura Singh in the Clone Wars 2 times. By the way,
Okay,
she verbally says like fire up Slave One, like
okay.
literally, but so that's in the Clone Wars show. But apparently this person on Reddit is saying that Disney is changing the name of the ship, but only on the Lego sets, and they give an example here, because they go as far to say as they have a Lego set of the Havoc Marauder, which is the Bad Batch's ship, and
Yep.
on the packaging for that, it's called the Bad Batch Attack Shuttle, but in the show, it's frequently referred to as the Marauder, like
And that would make that in this circumstance, that would make more sense, especially with the Legos, because they're towards they're directed towards a younger audience that A wants to know that it's Boba Fett's ship. So they're gonna
exactly.
be more excited when they're walking down the toy aisle and they see Boba Fett's ship. If they see Slave One, they may see Boba Fett on it, but they may not understand or know that it's called Slave One. They may just be like, "Oh, I don't know what that is." But if they see Boba Fett's ship, they're like, "Oh, I want that." Plus, then there's also just the idea that if they do see Slave One, they may turn to their parents and be like, "What's slave mean?" And then you have
Yeah, you
an
have that.
interesting conversation that maybe parents aren't ready to have quite for yet for younger kids. I don't know. So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see. This may all be much ado about nothing, but
I think honestly, in the end, it probably is. And even if it's not, it's like I said, like you just ignore it and move on with your day. It doesn't really change
yeah,
anything, but it really does. It's such a like, frankly, a dumb name. Like if they were just gonna like completely just like it's always gonna be referred to as Boba Fett's Starship. Like that doesn't go along with anything in Star Wars.
no,
Anything like
no,
especially
they
any of
could
the
have come up
ships.
with something else. Yeah,
Yeah, like, there is a they coulda just went back to calling it a fire spray, like,
yeah,
fire spray 1, or give it another number, fire spray ni
sure,
1874, like, like, something, like, just it because Boba Fett's starship is just a descriptive explanation of something. So,
yeah,
that's all it is. It's like, that's what it is. It's Boba Fett's starship. So, like, it totally makes sense that that's just what they're gonna call it for the toys, like, honestly.
yeah.
And, like, you made a
The
good point
Millennium
too,
Falcon
someone
is no
sees
longer
it.
the The Millennium Falcon is no longer the Millennium Falcon. It's Han Solo and Chewbacca's starship.
Exactly. I wouldn't doubt if they make a new one, that's what it's gonna say. And if they made one for the Solo movie, it would say Lando Starship.
Yes.
Like, frankly, and like you said, it really does make sense though, because like if a kid watches it, they're not gonna know what the hell the slave one is, especially since no one does ever say it, frankly.
Yeah.
And they say it so few of times, and kids have such short attention spans that they're not paying attention to that shit anyway. Like Hunter has said a couple times, like "Get to the Marauder," but like, no one's paying attention to that. Only people like I would know that that's called the Marauder. Like a kid's not gonna know that. Yeah, so I mean, it makes a good point. Nevertheless,